Hello, it's Alex. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be doing a sewing room tour. I've been saying I'm going to do it for a little while, ever since I moved into this room, sort of end of September, beginning of October. If you've been following me for a little while, you might know that I moved sewing rooms in the middle of the pandemic because of kids being back from uni and all of that sort of thing. And it meant that I was actually in the smallest bedroom in the house, which was a struggle. I mean, you know how much stuff there is when you're sewing. I wanted it to be a space that I would really enjoy being in, as well as being very practical. And I wanted to avoid something that felt cold or clinical, hence me choosing this, I guess it's like a rusty kind of colour paint, which I wasn't brave enough. I don't know if brave's right, actually. I think the room would have been too dark, but I wasn't brave enough to put it on all four walls. I just put it on this one, and then I've got this sort of off-white colour on the rest. But I wanted something with a bit of warmth, so I got that paint from Lick, who do really nice paints, by the way. Pricey, but it's okay if it's just one wall. I think there are some bits and pieces that I've kind of changed the way I do over the years. Some things that work for me that might work for you, or they might not, who knows. Yeah, and if anyone's got any tips, please let me know in the comments. That would be great. If you like what I've done, give me a thumbs up. That would be great as well. So yeah, I think we'll get on to it. We've had these drawers for a long time and they're pretty beaten up. They're very kind of industrial, but they are absolutely perfect to have in my sewing room. I keep various bits and pieces on it. My poor cheese plant is not enjoying being in the corner there, but I've got my iron and my steamer with my jug for water. The vintage irons I use quite a lot as pattern weights, but also for cold pressing. And I've got my iron remotely operated, so I don't even have to get up to turn it on, or more importantly, to remember to turn it off again. So I'll show you what's in the drawers here. Now, some of them are just sort of ordinary stationery things, but I'll show you the exciting ones because I have to say, some of these drawers give me absolute joy every time I open them. So the top one is all thread. So this side is all the Gutermann thread, and then this side is overlocking thread. Obviously this has all been collected over some period of time. I used to store my threads on one of those wall mounted stands, and somebody quite rightly pointed out that it was right in the window and that weakens the threads. So that was partly the reason of putting it in here, but partly, to be honest, because I just love how it looks. I just love it. So the next drawer down is buttons and bits and pieces. Don't want it to fall out. I just liked how those looked. So, as I'm sure happens to lots of you, people give me old sewing kits that have belonged to relatives who aren't with us anymore. Some bits I've picked up from charity shops, and obviously some I've bought. So I've tried to keep them in some semblance of order, partly because of just differentiating the colours, but also because it's really handy to be able to just lift out a section when I'm looking to match buttons to a particular fabric, so I can just lift it out and see what I need. Mostly buttons, things like snaps. These are all, as you can see, buckles, that sort of thing. Got dungarees, clips. Obviously, as I say, all collected over a period of time. This section here is all buttons to be covered, as are these metal ones here. And then over here is more sort of bits and pieces. So, things like the bias makers, the tool for snaps, chalk, just general stuff. Got pipe cleaners at the back here, which, to be honest, I use more than anything for cleaning my overlocker. I find that to be really good. There are also pipe cleaners inside my tulips that I made that make them stand up. These are the brilliant point, oh, not that, that's one of those ones with a hook. I don't really rate those as point turners, but these ones I think are brilliant as point turners. I tend to keep the very narrow one by my sewing desk because I use that one the most. That sort of thing. Lead weights, which I use sometimes when I'm coat making. That's on my coat making tips video. Oh, toothpicks. Toothpicks are here for when I'm sewing on buttons, so that the button isn't too close to the fabric. You can actually get it into the buttonhole. You know, all of these bits and pieces. So this drawer of delights is ribbons, piping, bias binding, trims, anything that's a trim and not elastic. So you know, I've got these ones that I still haven't used that I bought from Frumble, some from the market and Longsight, you know, all of this sort of thing, velvet ribbon, cording, and then at the very end here, hopefully you can see, is my stash of zips. This one is all things elastic. So everything in there from wider elastic lace like this, which is more for lingerie, that kind of thing. But yeah, you know, a nice little pair of cami shorts in that. And then everything from wider but still decorative elastic, and then your sort of more bog standard. I like this wider one that you get. It's great for those assembly line cuff tops and not always as easy to find. So yeah, things like my silicone elastic. This is a bag of fold over elastic for lingerie making or knickers. So that's all the elastics. And then this one is different weights of interfacing. That's my bag of soluble interfacing in there, which is great for, I use more than anything for sewing buttonholes. You know, if you've got one of those buttonholes that does not want to sew, the machine's kind of chewing it up, to put a bit of water soluble interfacing underneath between the fabric and the button, no, between the fabric and the machine, works really, really well. But different weights, stretch interfacing, some interlining, some of this thicker stuff that's more for tailoring. I noticed there's a rogue set of shoulder pads in here. And then these are scraps because I can't bear to just throw them away. You never know when you might need a little bit of interfacing. And I've also got, where is it? Oh, it's got stuck, there we go. The sort that's, you know, like a tape, which is great for seams. So seam tape. Let's hope that doesn't jam up the drawer. So that is mostly it on this side. And then this one is also threads, but this time it's the larger cones, some of which have come from cheap and cheerful places like Lidl, which is why they've still got plastic on, because they're so inexpensive when they've got them in. I usually just try and buy a couple of colours. So these were all my pressing things. This is obviously my sleeve board. And then I got this set of 3 pressing cloths from the ladies at Lulou Designs. So for each different sort of thing. So that's just muslin, that's just sort of everyday workday one. That is silk organza. Don't tell them. I've already managed to make a mess of it with some interfacing. That's great because you can see through it to what you're pressing. And then you've got a thicker one, a more cottony one, which is great for things like wool and coats. So I keep all of those on the little hooks under here. My, you know, what are these things called? You know, that get dog hair off. And my cashmere comb, just because anything clothing related tends to happen in here. So if I'm debobbling But more importantly, this sheet is really useful for, you know, it's one of these baking sheets that you're supposed to put in the bottom of the oven, and I use it for anything to do with interfacing. So it saves my ironing board cover from getting really manky. It's really good if you're block fusing because obviously it's silicone, so the interfacing just peels off. So this is obviously my cutting table. As I've only got the one side against the wall, and that's brilliant because for man handling or woman handling fabric and big large patterns, it's great to be able to walk all the way around for pinning and cutting and all of that kind of stuff. It's fantastic. I also really didn't want to have a table that was solid below. In that, I didn't want to have drawers, or sometimes people use those, you know, the IKEA shelves that are in sort of cubby holes. You know, I've got my fabric in those. I'll come to the fabric in a minute, by the way. So yeah, I didn't want to do that because I feel like then you really have got a big solid lump. But also it was important to me that I had a table that I could sit at. I have a stool and I sit at this here because I'm the sort of person that likes to spread out, and when I'm planning things and sketching and other bits and pieces that I've been doing recently, I like to have quite a big space. Below this is an IKEA bar, as in, you know, the kind of bar that you sit and have a drink at. This one has quite a solid metal frame all the way around, and it comes with the top, or you can buy it without the top, and that works really well for me because it's actually a little bit narrower and a little bit shorter than I wanted. And then I just had a top, you know, cut to measure locally, and we attached that onto it. It's got those little hooks at the end, which is very handy. It works really well. So it's designed to, you know, to be sitting at. It's got this bar in the middle there, so I can put my feet on that. It works really well. And when it came to working out the size, I obviously had some parameters to work within because of the room itself. But I did already have these 3 cutting mats, and they were so close to the kind of size that I was going to go for. It just made sense to work out what that is. So these 3 are just literally glued down. I'm sure if I was trying to be a bit more fancy, I would have had them all the same colour and perhaps worked within the colour scheme of the room and all of that sort of thing. But you know, I already had them. I'm not going to throw away things that work perfectly well. And in regard to the fabric, I have decided to keep my fabric in the same place it was in my previous sewing room. So because the previous sewing room was a lot smaller, I just didn't have the space for the fabric, and I have it stored outside that room in those IKEA square cubby things. I'm still keeping all my patterns upstairs. Any PDF patterns I've printed out are kept up there, and obviously any paper patterns as well. I will admit I have slightly overflowed into one of the kids' bedrooms in terms of where the patterns are, but when they come home I just take them out and they don't know. These are mostly things that relate to cutting out and prepping. So obviously there's, you know, my ham and my clapper. I think I bought this on Etsy or eBay from somebody who made them to order a good few years ago. They really are fantastic for pressing. So I use these pebbles for pattern weights. This here is things like my rotary cutters and my chalk markers, stuff I grab on a regular basis. These are just so satisfying, aren't they? I made a shirt this week, and you know, every time you get this thing out, I don't know, there's something very satisfying about it. Up here, these are all my labels. Now, like lots of people, I got the Kylie in the Machine label advent calendar this year, so I've got lots to add to the collection I already had, so I keep all of those in there. This one, this is chalks, and this one is currently empty, but that is where I keep any metal things that need to be discarded later on. I've just emptied it recently. So things like when the blades from my rotary cutters, old needles, if I bend a pin, that sort of thing. I keep all of the sharp bits and pieces in there. And then this over here is again anything. I'm coming back around here. I feel like I'm in QVC. Yeah, this is again, it's things mostly to do with marking. Obviously a seam gauge. I have about 3 or 4 seam gauges dotted around this room because it seems to me whenever you want one it's not within reach. Seam gauge, pattern wheel, marking wheel, my punch that I'm always talking about, the awl, all of those pattern related things, notcher, the friction erasable pens, which are brilliant because they are erasable when you put the iron on them. So if I can, I always use these for marking my fabric, but I would always do a test first. And when I say do a test, I mean don't just test it and check that when you put the iron on it, the marking goes away. Because on darker colours, sometimes you can still see it. But also check that when the fabric goes cold, the marking doesn't come back. So what I often do is I mark the fabric and then bung a scrap in the freezer, because sometimes it comes back and you really don't want that. And last but that's not what I meant to do. Lastly, I keep templates of things like pockets. You'd be amazed, look how many different pocket shapes there are. Especially the ones that are on card, because they are great for pressing around the card to get not only a really nice curve, but also if you've got more than one, so that they're identical. And things like plackets for cuffs, sleeve plackets. So anything like that is usually on that clip, nice and neat, not falling all over the place like I just did. This is the area where I tend to do my sewing. It does double up as sort of, you know, general admin desk, but I tend to tuck the keyboard away in the corner here. And if I'm sewing something that needs the machine and the overlocker, I'll move one of them round to here, because I don't really need the computer. I am usually listening to Radio 4 Play or a book on Audible, or, you know, Real Housewives of somewhere or another in the background on the computer. But yeah, it does mean that I've got one space here for sewing machine, potentially, and I swing the overlocker around there. Oh, look at this, I found this in TK Maxx. It's just a pen holder, but look, it's in the shape of a thimble. It's only a couple of pounds. So yes, all the bits and pieces I keep here. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but this, I don't know if my camera is going to focus on it. This is a cheap and cheerful makeup brush. I think it's supposed to be an eye makeup brush. And I found that these are an awful lot better for cleaning your machine and my overlocker than this kind of thing, which came with it, which is pretty sparse and has quite stiff little bristles, whereas I find this with the soft bristles to work really, really well. And, you know, even in the supermarkets do cheapo makeup brushes, don't they? So those work really well. As I said, I always have the narrow version of the not point turner, yeah, I guess it's a turner, isn't it? Anyway, turning tube thingies, always using that, so that lives within grasp. And then in here I have all my sort of bits and pieces that I'm going to grab on a regular basis. My unpicker, another seam gauge, point turners, chalk, favourite foot, all of that kind of stuff. And I recently got myself a new magnifying light. The old one I had was a lot clunkier and big and bulky. This one's great because it's flexible. So this is great for when you're to look through this when you're doing any unpicking, and it's touch sensitive, so you just turn it on like that and it changes according to how long you keep your hand on it. But also what's great about it is that it's rechargeable. so I can unplug it and move it anywhere around the desk that suits me, and I've even been known to take it downstairs when I'm doing a bit of crochet at night time. I'm still using my trusty, she's my absolute favourite, Mrs. Pankhurst pincushion. And then I've got my corkboard all around, which works at my wheelie chair. This chair, we came our way, it's an Aeron chair, and they are really, really expensive, but we've got lots of friends that work in the design world, and it came our way when somebody was working for a company that had unfortunately gone bankrupt, and they were selling them for about £50. So we grabbed two. One is long gone because that was probably quite a long time ago. Might even be as long as 20 years ago. But they are absolutely brilliant because obviously I'm rolling around here, but it's really adjustable in terms of height and the back adjustment and all the rest of it. These are some patterns that I've bought recently. I love this vintage nightdress. Whether I'll ever make it or not, I don't know. That New Look pattern is one that it's out of print, but I think would look really nice in linen for the summer, just like worn in that picture, you know, with just a top underneath, bare arms. So that's something I'm planning to make. And then this Butterick shirt dress pattern is on my to-do list. I just bought that recently from the Fold line. Keep a couple of pairs of scissors nearby. I tend to have my pins on my wrist there. Needles are up there, including some you can see literally just been pinned into the board. I really like that jeans label there, you know, the can't touch this. That there is the list of all the suggestions from comments about where to look for pull-on trousers from you lovely subscribers, so I'm going to have to go look through that. So having said that I keep all my fabric upstairs, I do actually have a little bit of fabric down here, and that's in these two boxes. The bottom tends to be either projects to finish off or jobs, really, you know, repairs, that sort of thing. And then the top one is full of fabric that I've either bought recently or is destined for something that I'm planning to sew in the coming weeks. So to have a little sneaky peek, these are some fabrics that I've got plans for. So this came from, well, my little labels are inside. So whenever I buy any fabric, I wash it and dry it straight away, and I dry it however I'm intending to dry the garment. And then I put one of these labels on. So it tells me it's from Bornella Fabrics, there's 2 meters. I've got 2 ticks, so that means it's been washed and dried, and that it says Edwidge. It's going to be an Edwidge blouse from Vicky Sews. This one I bought just in the last week or 10 days from Sister Mintaka, and that's going to be a Fibre Mood Norma. Green viscose twill from Lamazi. I don't yet know what that's going to be. This one, oh, has anyone got any ideas? This fabric I bought maybe 2 or 3 months ago from Simply Fabrics in Brixton. It's a silk twill. I've got 2 meters of it. So I've only got 1 tick on there, so that means I've washed it, but it hasn't gone into the tumble dryer because it's silk, it never will. But you know, it's like a silk scarf almost. And it's sort of in panels. I don't know, you'll be able to see properly without me fully pulling it out. But yeah, I've no idea at this point in time what to make with it. I'm waiting for inspiration to strike. And then this gingham that's here is going to be a shirt dress. It's that Butterick shirt dress. And I'm really pleased that I did decide to get an armchair and put it in here, because at one point when I was planning the room, I wasn't sure. I thought, is that the sort of thing that you think you're going to use, but in fact probably won't, and the dog might get more use out of. But actually I do sit here a lot during the day. It's a nice spot to sit and have a cup of coffee. There's some magazines down there, you know, if you're having a bit of a scroll or answering some emails just on my phone. I really wanted this room to feel like an extension of our living space and not sort of all about practicality and to be very stark and more like a workroom. And yeah, this has really helped to do that, and I've really enjoyed that. And also putting things on the walls. I intend for the walls to fill up as time goes by, but for the time being I didn't want to just rush out and get things for the sake of it. I only wanted to put things up that have some kind of meaning or that I really love. So it's quite good that I've got a bit of extra space to add things in as and when, you know, as and when. So that's my room. Please let me know what you think in the comments. And if you've got any top tips or any ideas, please let me know. I really would appreciate that. It's yeah, it's just takes a bit of time, doesn't it, to work out what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure it will continue to evolve in here. But overall, I absolutely love being in this space. It feels very me. And that's something that's actually been really nice about doing this room, because when you've been in a relationship or a marriage for a long time, all those decisions tend to be joint ones. And although Dave and I have got very, very similar taste, it's really nice to be able to do a room and choose things that are just purely my choice and for me and for nobody else. I don't have to take anyone else into consideration and just do what I want to do. And it's been good fun, and I just love being in here. So yeah, thought you might want to have a little nose around. I will be back very soon. Please give me a thumbs up if you like what I've done, and if you haven't subscribed, it would be fantastic if you would. I've been making a few bits and pieces recently, so I've got things to show you. Not sure if it will be next week, but it will certainly be soon. I am having a tattoo done next week. Anyway, speak to you soon. Bye bye.